Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Social Club at the End of the World. And I'm happy to be joined today by my buddy, Dr. Dan Bader and Doctress Newtopia. Welcome, Dan. Welcome, Doctress. Jump in anytime. I thought I'd do a screen share and kick off the topic. The topic of today is this, future city that Bill Gates is going to be building in Arizona on the 25,000 acres he recently acquired. Is this the answer? Is this, the kind of future city of the future that's going to take us to a livable, survivable future? Or is it just more of the same? So that's what we're going to delve into. And for starters, I'll do screen share and we'll take a look at what we're talking about here. Bill Gates' futuristic city. So let's start with, there's a video here that that goes into this. So let's start at the beginning. Can you guys both see the video?
Yes.
Looks
Okay.
like a whole lot of nothing. An undeveloped area about 45 minutes west of downtown Phoenix off I-10 near Tonopah. But this land is now in the hands of one of the richest men on earth.
I have a dream that every child in America will attend a great school.
One Bill Gates, and his plan is a big one. Belmont Partners, an Arizona-based real estate investment group, says a firm owned by Gates dropped a whopping $80 million to kickstart the development of a brand new community there called Belmont. The end goal? Turn this blank slate, roughly the size of Tempe, into its own smart city. Driverless cars, digital networks, data centers, you name it.
Bill Gates is known for innovation and those kind of things, and I think he picked the right location. He's coming to Arizona.
Ronald Schott of the Arizona Technology Council says this spot, while remote now, is a good one, in part due to the proposed I-11 freeway, which would run right through Belmont and connect to Las Vegas.
Finally, Arizona is getting recognized for being a place for innovation.
3,800 acres will go towards office, commercial, and retail space. 470 acres for public schools. Plus room for 80,000 housing units.
Their goal is to try to make this the most positive state to do business in and advocate for the technology industries.
Now, with the exception of those details I just talked about, the attorneys representing the investors are staying pretty tight-lipped. They're not commenting on when construction will start or if Microsoft will be opening an office there. Bianca Bono, 12 News.
So great. All this speculation, basically. So that's I thought that was a great 2-minute segment. And why don't we round it out by just reading the rest of this article, which just came out. The smart city will be called Belmont. Bill Gates is creating his own futuristic smart city. What would you do if you have billions of dollars in your pocket? Probably you might think of creating your own city of the future. That was a project we did at Microsoft, by the way, called Cities of the Future. I'll comment more on that later. According to Arizona-based investment firm Belmont Partners, one of Bill Gates' investment firms has spent $80 million to buy a massive chunk of land spread across 25,000 acres. It's situated 45 minutes west of downtown Phoenix, off of I-10 freeway near Tonopah. The plan is to turn the land, which is roughly the size of Tempe, into a futuristic smart city called Belmont. It would be able to accommodate around 80,000 residential units after leaving 3,800 acres for commercial space and 470 acres for public schools. Arizona Technology Council's executive emeritus Ronald Schott said that Bill Gates is known for innovation, that he has picked a good spot. The high-tech smart city would take advantage of the proposed I-11 freeway, which will pass through Belmont and connect to Las Vegas. Currently, there is no word on when the construction of the said Bill Gates City of the Future would commence. This ex-CEO of Microsoft recently slipped from the place of the world's richest man, but still his wealth is beyond the imagination of most of us. What do you think about Bill Gates' smart city? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and there's a number of comments down here. But what's most interesting to me is our comments on the Social Club at the End of the World. And I would invite Doctress Newtopia, if you'd like to kick it off, since you are our resident futurist and arcology expert. And it looks like she just accidentally dropped off, but I'm sure she'll be right back. In the meantime, I have some thoughts, but I'm sure doctors will be back soon. So I can begin sharing some of mine. Dan, feel free to jump in with yours, and then we'll give the mic to doctors when she reappears. Right on cue. Doctoress, welcome back. Welcome back. So Doctoress, I'd love to hand the mic over to you since you are our resident futurist and expert in arcology, and perhaps you could even educate us briefly about what arcology is, but really just take your time. It's going on mute. Doctoress Newtopia.
In the year 2000, I did a collage. And that collage I did while I lived at Arcology. Arcology is west of Phoenix, and it is a model arcology. Arcology is a word that fuses together arcology, ecology, and nature. So it's this ecological city design. That's important because right now our cities are very alienated from nature, and they actually destroy the living environment around us with such things as roads, cutting down trees, and that's why we have this problem of the habitat loss for animals. So many animals are suffering now, and so many are threatened with extinction because of the way that we have built our cities, this urban sprawl development. So Solari came up with an idea of what to do about this. Now, he used some of the designs from the Native American culture and the ancient goddess tradition, where they live close together in compact areas and allowed the surrounding areas to go back into wilderness areas or agricultural areas that didn't spread out all over the place. So you can actually walk from the center of the city to the wilderness in a reasonable amount of time. In these cities, you did not have automobiles. So what happened to our cities? Well, this American dream happened after World War II, where everyone, the dream was home ownership. And there was a big housing boom with all the soldiers coming back from World War II. It created places like Levittown in New Jersey, which was a model of this American dream lifestyle. The American dream lifestyle, there's two components to it. One is the house of the nuclear family, and the other is the car. You have to have both of these in order to get around the city. Now, the city is really the basis of politics. In order to build a city, you have to connect all the different parts together in some kind of organized way. But in urban sprawl, these connections are fragmented. We don't build a whole city design and just kind of manifest one building at a time, one road at a time. There wasn't any overall plan. You know, now we do have city planning, but still we're basically dealing with this old structure of civilization. You can go back to Europe and see the same kind of development. So this is like a disease of European, and not just European, Asian culture as well. This is like a global disease of how we have developed these cities. And the house is also the basis of capitalism. The household is the cell within the economic unit that then makes the consumer society possible. Everyone needs their own lawnmower or their own refrigerator or stove. There's no collective responsibility or sharing of resources in this model. So this is the capitalist model gone crazy, because it needs this ever expanding growth economic model in order to make the economy continue to grow. And the growth of the economy is really one of the problems, because it continues to create this urban sprawl that we need in order to survive. And of course, the plants, animals, and the microorganisms also need it. So this model is destructive. And this is a program, like we're raised in this certain kind of dream. You know, even before birth, the mother is socially conditioned. I've got to have my house. I've got to have a mate that's going to support this lifestyle, that's going to allow my kid to have enough money to have food, housing, go to college, you know, to be able to, for them to support the American dream. So it replicates itself. This is why this dream continues to go on generation after generation after generation in its environmental sickness. We're at the point now that this civilization, as Guy McPherson says, is a global heat engine that he doesn't know how to turn off. And it's melting the polar ice caps. It's causing us to go into this climate crisis, as Al Gore says. So if the city is the problem, which so many experts say it is, then the city, a new kind of development, is the solution. Because we need to live somewhere, we need shelter. But we also need to have this harmony and balance with nature that we do not have now. So back to Solari's vision, he wanted to build a car-free city, a pedestrian-oriented city. And he was inspired by the Native Americans who live sustainably for hundreds of years. So that's why he developed this Arcology. Now, Gates' proposal to build this city in Arizona is very close to Arcology. It's in the same region of the world. And one article that I read even talks about the Solari model and the Gates model, going back to that collage that I put the two together in 2000 because I knew that this was significant. And I looked at the differences of the Gates vision. If you look at Gates' vision, look at his mansion. And maybe you can talk about that, Jamin, being from, talk about right now, you know, where Gates came from and what model he grew up in, since you also grew up in that neighborhood.
Yeah, right. Not only did I grow up in that neighborhood, but I also worked at Microsoft, and I actually worked directly with Bill Gates. I was corporate strategy manager at Microsoft. And so I know a lot about the man and the way he thinks. And, you know, I'll just start off somewhat, you know, metaphorically and poetically by saying that this climate crisis is not the first crisis that Bill Gates has faced in his life. He's faced a number of crises. There were personal crises growing up, right? Being bullied around in this toxic culture of privileged white Northeast Seattle, which is, you know, a culture that much of my growing up, not all of it. I grew up partly in California and partly in Seattle, in Northeast Seattle. But the years I spent in Northeast Seattle were very formative. And I was immediately immersed in this toxic culture. You know, as a little, you know, 10-year-old kid, you kind of, you know, you sort of adapt to whatever culture you're in. But there is so much bullying and so much comparison. And so Bill Gates, you know, he grew up, you know, he's a normal sized man, I would say, you know, as an adult, but he grew up small and skinny and very much intimidated by the bigger kids who bullied him regularly. So that was the first major crisis that he faced, was his crisis of growing up in this privileged white affluent suburban society, which, as I said, Northeast Seattle is probably the most toxic suburban society that I know of for privileged white people, toxic to the very privileged people who live there, because there is so much comparison, so much animosity, so much bullying, so much, not just keeping up with the Joneses, outdoing the Joneses. So it's a continuous process of outdoing. So Bill Gates was outdone as a kid. He was smaller. He wasn't popular. He wasn't one of the cool kids. And that was a real crisis. It was an existential crisis for him. And the way he fought himself out of that wet paper bag was to basically become dominant in something. It wasn't happening in sports, though he certainly tried that. So he found his way with computers. And so at first it was kind of being dominant in an area that was, kind of a fringe area, but it was an area where he could dominate. And then over the years, he transmuted and transformed that into economic domination. So now I'm the richest man in the world, but in his mind, he's still fighting those battles as an early teen, as a 10, 11, 12, 13, 14-year-old in Northeast Seattle, where the bigger kids are bullying him. This is his way of becoming bigger and better and winning and dominating. And now he's the richest man in the world with the biggest mansion and the biggest this and biggest that. I recall the song "Big Time" by Peter Gabriel. That was the theme song for the movie Big that Tom Hanks starred in. Big time, I'm on my way. So for him, his way of dealing with existential crises is becoming bigger, richer, more powerful, right? And dominating others. And I see this whole Belmont futuristic city, that I think the most telling point in the whole article was the very last sentence. He has slipped from the #1 spot. That is his big existential crisis right now. He is addicted to that #1 spot. He is addicted. That's heroin for him. He needs to be #1 because that is his only way that and in his mind, he can defeat this existential crisis of being bullied and dominated by others. So Belmont, the bottom line, Belmont, for all of its niceties around, so many acres for public schools, isn't that nice and generous? He's donating $460. The dude is going to turn that $80 million investment into a multi-billion-dollar return. And that's one of his ways in which he's going to reclaim that #1 spot. So that's his end game. It's not about Arcology. It's not about saving the planet or anything else. It's about making a buttload of money and also looking good at the same time. He's got to talk about this vision. My vision is that every student will have an education. Well, listen, asshole, if you were so concerned about the kids, you'd make sure that they had a breakfast to eat when they showed up at school. We would eliminate hunger. And that's what we're doing. Not Bill Gates is doing, but the Bill Gates of Bud, the guy you're talking to, is doing right here in the Seattle area. We're going to build our first permanent community cafe in Federal Way, Washington, a marginalized community to the south of Seattle. And that's the beginning of our revolution to end hunger. But that's a separate topic for a little later. Right now, I'm simply calling out Bill Gates because I think he needs to be called out. He has the power to single-handedly end hunger, and he's not doing it. So, 1 billion people are starving, and he's there trying to figure out how to make another $1 billion. Wrong answer, Bill. You're screwed up. You need to unscrew yourself. There are great people who can help you, but you need to be willing to take the first step and stand up and finally be a man at the age of 60 or 62 or however old you are at this point. Man up and take some responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility. You've got the power, the economic power, the technological power, the network power, the political power. So use it for good instead of just trying to make another few $1 billion and regain the #1 spot. So that's my rant about Bill Gates and where he came from and where I think he's going. And now I'll go on mute so other folks can chime in.
Yeah, one thought about this project. If Bill Gates understands the current climate change crisis, that potentially vast parts of the globe may not be habitable. And he's someone who I think historically or at present is concerned with overpopulation, with the situation of vast numbers of people around the world who will be wiped out as the climate change crisis unfolds. And this city, brings to mind, I think I've brought it into the discussion some time ago about Lovelock's concept of how to deal with the impending climate change problem, where he suggested that, like the social insects are able to construct nests in the Australian desert and adapt to that kind of environment, he suggests that cities be constructed analogous to these social insect nests, and then let the rest of the planet try to recover from the damage that's been done and the processes that have been unleashed. And so what I'm thinking as I'm listening is this project, this Belmont project, which from one point of view, which you're talking about, Jamin, could result in just kind of a very modern capitalistic project, where at the end of the day, you're going to have 80,000 housing units. That's going to be a lot. There's all sorts of ways to envision tremendous profits being generated from this kind of a project. But I wonder if this kind of a city is quickly convertible the way that it's being constructed. And Doctress, I guess you would be the best one to talk about that. Is it being constructed in a way that it could transform very quickly into one of these refuge cities that Lovelock talks about? So in a way, on the one hand, here's the larger issue, I guess. It seems pretty clear that decisions have been made by the powers that be, up in, I imagine, the higher levels of the intelligence community, the military, the corporate world, that the populations, including the population of the United States, cannot handle thoughts like our way of life is going to come crashing down. Almost like, it would cause massive breakdowns, perhaps unleashed anger and hostility at elites who have allowed this to happen. And so I wonder, it's pure, hypothetical fantasy in a way, but I just wonder whether or not this kind of city is being constructed and being presented in one sort of way, like this is going to be very nice, it's going to be modern, it's going to be ecological, et cetera, but still talking about it as if it's a normal capitalistic profit-making development, or is it something which is being constructed to eventually be able to serve as kind of a model refuge? I'm going to mute out.
It seems like to me from that little clip that we saw, it's very much based on the old archetype of the city. They talked about this division of the workspace, of the living space. That's very much a pattern of our linear cities. It's not compact, it's spread out. They also talked about driverless cars. Well, that's not going to be a pedestrian city. So he's not thinking in terms of arcology in this model. And he's just reinforcing the old archetypes with the gadgets of artificial intelligence. And this could really lead to a surveillance society like we've never seen before. So I really feel that Bill Gates needs to have a change of heart, a change of consciousness, which means a different pattern, a different geometrical pattern in his brain to be able to comprehend this new city design. And perhaps he needs to go and visit some of these archaeological sites where people did live sustainably. And also, I mean, I've written a dissertation about this. It's on the archetypes of architecture that talks about the conditioning and brainwashing that a patriarchal culture has. One of the basic things that a patriarchal culture does is it divides sacred space from secular space. This is a false division because all of the land is sacred space. But as long as you can make this division, then this space, this secular space, doesn't have the same rights and privileges as the sacred space. It's not revered. So that's a problem, because then you don't have this holistic approach to city design. I mean, there's just so many thoughts here of the possibilities that Bill Gates could do with the right archetypal understanding. And when you're talking about the arts, which architecture is, architecture is really art and technology combined. So he needs to get the art right. You know, he needs to get the right architects who have been developing cities and from scratch. Like I went and visited one in Dubai called Masdar City, which their goal is to build a zero carbon city. And they're working with the government of the United Arab Emirates and MIT to actually do that. So we have a few examples of what Bill Gates could do for humanity. And I just want to, get this message to him that this is the opportunity of his lifetime. This would be his great work. And not just his. If he starts thinking, this is the city in my image, it's not going to work. That's what Solari tried to do. His famous book is called City in the Image of Man, which makes it, he's the genius, he's the king, he knows everything. And so it did not allow for this new politics to happen. And politics, the root word is polis, or the city, the people, the body politic. If you leave that out of the formula of creating a new city, then it's just going to be the same old disaster of authoritarian politics.
If I could just jump in quickly. Does he, we don't know, clearly what's in his mind, what kind of, knowledge he has. But I just assume that someone in his position, given his set of interests and history, would somehow be aware of, for example, is it like the way Guy McPherson sometimes said, I'm pretty sure a lot of people know just as much as I do. Does he? Yeah, well, it's possible, no. But here's the thing. If he does know, if he actually understands that there is a risk that we're going to be entering a dystopian world, whether or not that goes to extinction, however long, because of climate change. Then, you know, it's hard for me to imagine that he wouldn't be probably contemplating who gets to survive. And I think that with Bill Gates, and again, my memory may be wrong, but I thought that he had an interest in overpopulation issues. And when you know, in a way, kind of linking it to Jamin's discussion of some of the psychological, emotional pressures that someone growing up where he did, etc. You have to wonder what his attitude might be towards, you know, the unwashed masses all over the place, including here in the U.S. And so you know, to me, when I listen to everything, it's like, yes, you know, the nature of these communities, if they are necessary, which they probably are, that's a really important thing, that we would not, you know, erect new structures that just resemble the failed old ones. But it's whether it's Bill Gates or anybody else who's in one of these authority figure positions, if they know what's going on, they really have a responsibility to try to let the general population understand some changes, differences. If they don't know,
I can't
go ahead,
anymore. I gotta talk, but you wrap up, Dan, because the thing is, it's like we're all operating under this assumption that Bill Gates is this great guy who's got all this insight and has the best interests of the world at heart. It is not the case. Dan, I'm sorry for interrupting. I'm gonna let you wrap up, but I am ready to go off because you need to hear the truth.
Yeah, so Jamin, I'm not thinking that Bill Gates has wonderful motives at all. But what let me. So, but what I'm really curious about is, does he, or what you think? Does he know what is coming?
The answer is no, and that's what I want you guys to hear. The answer is no, and that's what I want you guys to hear. Look, he gets it at some level. He gets that the world is imploding and all that, and there's going to be mass starvation. What he's all about is him and his surviving and thriving while the unwashed masses die off, so that we can, you know, just get all these despicable, deplorable, unwashed masses, just get them off the slate. And let's start with a clean slate so that he and his can survive and thrive. That's where he's going with this. It's so clear. So clear. And if you want, you know, evidence of this can be found everywhere. You know, just look at his quotes about Africa, for example. He keeps talking, you know, how does he justify his investments in massively profitable Monsanto? Oh, well, you know, I'm going to paraphrase Bill Gates. Well, you know, this is a way for us to increase crop production, and so that Africa can finally be self-sufficient in terms of food. What he's talking about is containing Africa, right? Let those unwashed masses stay in Africa. You've got no excuse. You're now self-sufficient food-wise. Never mind that the owners of all the agricultural land are Chinese sociopaths who are just growing grain to feed cattle so that nouveau riche Chinese can eat meat at every meal instead of once a month like they did back in the 70s. So it's so transparent, and I really believe this is Bill Gates' Harvey Weinstein moment. This is the moment when he gets outed. This is the moment when it is so clear he's got all these tools and resources and contacts and influence to really help steer Mother Earth and humanity onto a new course for survival. He's not interested in survival for the unwashed masses. He's interested in survival for him and his. Period. And you know, and he's not, that's why you never see him in public anymore. You never see him having open conversations, right? He is barricaded in, hoarding, amassing, and, you know, preparing him and his for that moment when the unwashed masses die off. They hunker down in their underground bunkers with, you know, hundreds of years of food supplies, and they're just basically waiting for the unwashed masses to die off. Okay, are they dead yet? Great. Now let's reemerge, and now we can populate, you know, the city of Belmont and these other properties of Bill Gates with wealthy white people. And we don't have to. This is his Harvey Weinstein moment. Wake up, people. Wake up, world. And if you choose to, wake up Bill Gates yourself and start to take some responsibility for all the mess that we have created. We, these privileged folks, privileged, wealthy folks. It's time for a completely new model along the lines of what Doctress Nutopia is talking about. But let's stop kidding ourselves. He does not get it. He's completely deluded. He's living through his own crisis. His own crisis is, holy shit, I'm no longer the richest man in the world, so I need to regain that #1 spot. Multiply 80,000 housing units times $100,000 profit per unit, and you get $8 billion. That would push him back into the #1 spot. So forget about all these ideas. And look, until Bill Gates really gets called out publicly as a Harvey Weinstein, which he is, not a sexual predator, but an economic predator, an environmental predator, a humanitarian predator. This is all predation on the poor and on Mother Earth herself. And I'm sorry for interrupting you, Dan, but it just makes me sick when people are just have these lofty ideas that Bill Gates has this vision, he knows what's coming, and that somehow he's doing something about it. He's not doing jack shit for the planet or for other people. It's all about him and his, period. And the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation ending malaria, this is just so he can look good. Why does he pick malaria? Because it's something he can dole out a few hundred million at a time, not the tens of billions that we need to end hunger. And that's what we're taking on, and that's why we're building an economic engine to generate the tens of billions of dollars we need every year to actually end hunger and heal Mother Earth. But that's going off on a different tangent. I'm going to go on mute and give y'all a chance to talk. Thank you for accommodating my request.
I will say to this, if you look at Gates's house, which I have seen photographs of, he lives in a mansion. And that's what billionaires do. The first thing they do when they start getting so rich, or these celebrities, is they buy this big estate, $1 million estate. I think it was something like $15 million his house he built it for. I'm not sure exactly what the price was. And he has all the latest gadgets, and he has a huge security system, and he has garages for all of his cars. And if everyone lived like Gates, we'd need 6 planet Earths. So this does not, it's just a symbol of greed. This is what happens. These billionaires think that they're above humanity and they can use more of the resources. And so it's not a democratic system. And if we want to save the planet, we have to think of how do we house 7 billion of us in a way that the Earth can survive and also adapt to climate change, because we might have destroyed our climate so badly now that we need protection. Our architecture is actually the protection for us, our human species, to survive. And we can't leave anyone out. This has got to be a design for a one planetary consciousness, as you like to say, Jamin, collective intelligence. Solari's designs, he was designing a society he called the frugal society. People didn't live in mansions. People live in small areas, but they have a lot of collective space. There would be scientific laboratories for people to use who could use them, and artist studios. Now, that little clip that we heard of about Gates's Belmont, that's such a bad name for a city. it didn't say anything about art studios. It said workspace. It didn't say anything about leisure space or automation, like automated industries. That's one of the things that Solari's designs have. So he's leaving out a lot of important things that need to be in this new container if it's going to be a model for the future.
And that's what it's not, doctors. Pardon me for interrupting, but it's not going to be this great new container, this great new this, if it's going to be this, if it's going to be this. It's not. It's about making money and perpetuating the old system. And that's why it needs to be called out. That's why this is Bill Gates' Harvey Weinstein moment.
Okay, I agree. So that's what we've got to make this. We've got to make this hit this moment where we call him out on his greed.
And that's what this is. This video right now that we're recording, this is the Harvey Weinstein moment for Bill Gates. World, meet your new Harvey. Meet the next Harvey. His name is Bill Gates, and he lives right here a stone's throw from where I'm talking. Meet your next Harvey.
If we operate under the assumptions, which I agree with, that this project, unless it's being completely masked over, is essentially something which is being generated by the old models which we've all been socialized into and assimilated. I just throw this in here. Lately I've been working on a presentation on violence. And one of the areas that I really didn't have extensive familiarity with was some of the thinking by the military elites concerning their strategies for waging war. And one of the things that just keeps is in my mind is that during World War II, when decisions were made to carpet bomb and firebomb Germany before we had the atomic bombs dropped on Japan, the idea was apparently that they thought that by doing this extensive bombing on civilian populations, they would get a similar kind of a reaction that many infantry soldiers suffered when they were in combat situations. They were getting a high rate of, now we would call it PTSD. And so the thought was, let's expose the civilian populations of these cities in Germany to the kind of stress that befalls these infantry soldiers, and then the city's going to fall apart, everybody's going to break down, et cetera, et cetera. And they were willing to do that in order to get a win. And yet the populations didn't react that way. They did not react like the infantry soldiers, nor did the populations in England respond that way when they were getting the same treatment to a degree by the Germans. And so the concept of what happens to a population when they are faced with, kind of an existential threat, I think that's pretty informative. And where I would go with that in terms of the climate change issue is I believe that populations would respond in a similar kind of a way to that particular threat, that they would not completely fall apart. But I do believe that the same kind of thinking is probably there on some level. And the other thing by doing this research is that there's a very, very strong connection between somebody being able to destroy and kill and the distance. How far are you away from the actual dying. And so, it's pretty well known that people who are flying planes, dropping bombs, do not have major problems with what they're doing. And likewise, most of the, the artillery, the shells and all of that being fired, there's quite a distance. Whereas if you're up close and, in it, there's much more danger of breaking down. So with climate change, there seems to be the assumption that the population can't deal with an existential threat, which this appears to be, and therefore we're not going to tell them. And there may be these other motives, of course, so it's coming and we need to save ourselves. But the other thing is it's so distanced, where you still have people talking about it as if the actual carnage that would result is way, way off in the future. And I think that, so when we talk about, let's, call Bill Gates on a certain kind of bullshit that may be being put out there. And let's call out others in a way where they have to address what it is they actually know, what they're trying to do. So for example, Jamin, when you say, and I totally can get on board with it, with the idea that they assume it's coming and that the elites deserve, the ones who are more intelligent, more creative, more like Bill Gates, essentially, get to survive. And the others, the useless feeders, etc., need to be, just let them go as the climate deteriorates. But I think that that's something which somebody could answer, and even though, of course, they would deny it, but I think those are the kind of questions that really need to be put to people. What is it you think is going to happen? And what is it? What is your approach to solving it? I'm going to go ahead and mute out. And
no, you're absolutely right. Bill Gates' one and only ticket out of Harvey Weinstein dumb. This is his Harvey Weinstein moment. He's the next Harvey Weinstein, and his ticket out of Harvey Weinstein dumb is to finally come out and say, okay, the gig's up. We're in a death spiral. Mother Earth is in a death spiral, and we need to use all of our resources, all of our technologies and skills to create a new future that's not just sustainable, but regenerative, that heals Mother Earth and all of her children, all of her species, all of her ecosystems, all of her life-supporting systems, each and every man, woman, and child on planet Earth. If he were to come out and do that, then the spotlight would be immediately on him. Well, you've got all these resources. What are you doing with them, right? See, there's basically two ways you can go. If you're a rich person in the world today, you either take your resources and direct them towards healing, or you direct them towards hoarding. It's hoarding or healing, and no, you cannot do both at the same time. Hoarding is what got us into this mess. Everyone trying to hoard, everyone trying to build the biggest McMansion they can. Arizona, the landscape of Arizona is dotted with mansions of the rich that are huge contributors to the global heat engine that civilization is. The richer you are, the bigger your mansion, the bigger the carbon footprint, and the more species went extinct in service of your riches. It's that simple. You're either healing or you're hoarding. And if Bill Gates were to make the shift to healing, it would be a 180 turn, and he would suddenly have to start deploying his great resources for the benefit of humanity and Mother Earth instead of the apparent benefit of himself, because he thinks he's going to survive this mess, he and his kids and everything else. And it's true, several hundred of them or even thousands of them will survive in their bunkers, right? And they think that they're going to emerge into a world that they can now, they're the ones who can multiply and it'll be, you know, a clean, white bread, you know, wealthy, white, privileged world, because all the brown people will be exterminated by the climate change and famine and war and everything else. But I've got news for you, Bill Gates. When you emerge from your bunker, you're emerging into a radioactive world, because of the 440 nuclear power plants will have melted down in this Mad Max dystopia that we're heading into. I'll give another example. My former boss at Microsoft, who was Chief Technology Officer, Alex Ganaras, and one of the people closest to Bill Gates, I very aggressively reached out to him when Professor Guy McPherson was here in town. And I said, Alex, you got to meet Guy. We got to get together. Give me 20 minutes. And I guarantee you, you won't regret it. And he emailed me back. He said, okay, now I'm intrigued. What's this about? When I told him it was about abrupt climate change, he's like, whoa, well, you know, that's a big topic. They want to wash their hands of it. They want to wash their hands of it. And my thought was, if we can get Alex to wake up, he makes one phone call, he gets right through to Bill Gates and says, Bill, you got to see this. They don't want to wake up. They're keeping the wool over their own eyes. And they're this kind of dual reality where they get that we're going down, but they don't really want to see the details. They just keep hoarding, thinking that they and theirs are going to survive, and they're wrong.
Perhaps approach it this way. If you know you have this connection with this Microsoft man who has direct access to Gates. I was in a class at UMass Amherst. It was on revolution. It wasn't a popular topic. It was a anthropology class, and it had about 4 people in it. One of them happened to be Mackie Mandela, Nelson Mandela's daughter. And it was right when he was coming out of prison and the apartheid was ending. So, I mean, there was this huge opportunity for Mandela to do something different. And a big house, you know, they have a housing crisis in South Africa. And so this would have been a perfect way, you know, new visionary architecture. Well, that really didn't happen because Mandela was, he didn't have that kind of visionary perspective. And it was more the hoarding perspective that we've all been conditioned to, you know, this archetype of destruction and of me and mine and my family. That's what people are concerned with. Well, that we had to do a paper in that class, and I realized taking that class that the real revolution is a new city design. You cannot have a revolution without it. It's not just a revolution, it's a transfiguration. It's transformation of the old archetype into the new, more sophisticated and evolutionary approach. It is the most creative act because it takes all these different fields coming together in a unified vision. It takes the intelligentsia to do it. The Russian Revolution didn't do it. The American Revolution didn't do it. Thomas Jefferson did not do it. He was the only founding father that was even interested in architecture. And he didn't do it. And he was caught up in slavery and building Monticello. So we don't even have a democratic architecture. It never happened. You know, we haven't been able to come out of the grips of Europe and do something really new, really American. So I think Bill Gates, this is his moment. If we can convince, I don't know, maybe not. Maybe it's going to take a democratic a revolution to do this great thing. So I'm certainly not going to put all of my hope into Bill Gates. I think he would need some kind of spiritual conversion to really understand this.
And he will. This, what we're doing right now, is the beginning of a public intervention. You know, when somebody's an alcoholic and, you do an intervention in his living room or something like that, right? A bunch of you friends and family show up and they do an intervention, right? Bill Gates needs to be shocked into waking up. And this is the beginning of a public intervention into the life of Bill Gates. Yes, the life of, we're intervening on you, Bill, because Bill, we need you in the good fight, not perpetuating the bad fight. And the first moment is a shocker to you. This is your Harvey Weinstein moment. World, wake up. Meet your next Harvey Weinstein. His name is Bill Gates. I, Jamin Shively, am calling him out, and I challenge anyone, any reporter, any investigative journalist, Bill Gates himself or any friend or relative of Bill Gates, any Microsoft representative, all the way up to my friend Satya Nadella, who's the current CEO. I will publicly debate anyone on these very topics. Bill Gates is the next Harvey Weinstein. He's not a sexual predator. We would know that if he was. He's not. But he is an economic and environmental and social predator because he's perpetuating the very system of hoarding, which is destroying all of us and Mother Earth. So I really think, let's not dance around the issue and, kind of give him the benefit of the doubt and wonder if he gets it and wonder what it will take. What it's going to take is it'll take the same thing that it takes an alcoholic or a heroin addict. It takes an intervention. This is the beginning of said intervention. Bill Gates, welcome to your intervention. Going on mute.
Yeah, the issue, the psychology of hoarding, we're using that term, and I think it's applicable in terms of what happens when you're driven by greed, selfishness. When I talk about, I do this presentation on hoarding, and I attribute the emotional drivers to an emotion which is known as interest excitement, which has to do with the acquisition part of it. And interest excitement is a motivational energy. It tends to urge exploration, acquisition, and it facilitates that by giving a person two thoughts, that whatever it is they're focused on is all good, all important, all necessary, and it also gives them thoughts that minimize consequences of what it is they're doing, because it's all about taking the action. Get it, do it, you call it the Nike emotion. And so that has to do with the acquisition part. And then the other part, the other main emotion involved is anxiety, which basically, wants you to avoid or escape, and it gives you two thoughts that whatever the threat is going to be a nightmare, and you're not capable of handling it, so escape or avoid. And so when people are hoarders, the real hoarders, they got all sorts of clutter, they basically are driven to acquire it through interest, excitement, emotion, which is very reinforcing. It's very pleasurable. And that, and it takes away some emotional pain. And then they are very anxious. They're afraid to let go of their stuff once they have it. They actually become attached to it emotionally. And so when you're talking about money hoarding, let's say wealth hoarding, it's the same, it's no different in the sense that, we're all, constrained by our emotional makeup. Interest, excitement for Bill Gates is the same as for everybody else. Likewise, anxiety. And I think that, and then of course, you get other things, you get shame about guilt, about what it is you've done that can come in. But I do think that it is conceptually sound to think about it as a unchecked hoarding problem, and it is like an addiction. I mean, most addictions are driven by interest, excitement, and then anxiety about giving it up.
It's
So I
not
just
like
wanted to-
addiction. It is an addiction. Sorry for the interruption. Back to you, Dan.
So again, if you have, when somebody is addicted to something, they do have to, at some point, be realistic. I am addicted. I do want to have more and more of this. I'm not really tuned into the consequences. The way that you manage it on a very micro level, in a, say, psychotherapeutic type of setting is you go ahead and have the person be able to give themselves an emotional timeout, like an anger timeout or something. And what you do is you force yourself to think about maybe getting more, in this case, it's money. Getting more money seems really good, important, and necessary. It's driven me for a long time. But as good as it seems in my mind, it's not really that good. It's just the emotion making it feel that way. And the other thing is to then remind yourself of the consequences. If a bunch of us billionaires who logically need nothing in terms of material things at all keep being driven by this addiction to money, we're causing all sorts of damage. There are consequences. I am hurting a lot of people by my continual pursuit of this addictive behavior. And I think that is a sound way of characterizing what people like Bill Gates, who are extraordinarily influential, are actually doing. And they always tend to, because of their emotional state regarding the collection, they tend to minimize and rationalize in whatever ways they can what it is they're doing, just like an addict who's addicted to alcohol or some drug would do. I'm going to mute out.
So this is my final words here today. And this is for you, Mr. Gates. We are the same age. We're both baby boomers. And during our lifetime, we have seen the resources of the world dwindle. We have seen the rainforests of the world be cut down. During our lifetime, a lot of species have gone extinct. And the world looks like it's going to collapse environmentally. Just in our lifetime, since the World War II, post-war generation, the baby boomers have destroyed the world. And is that our legacy? Is that what this love and peace, the anti-war, Vietnam War generation, is that what we're supposed to do? So I am talking to you on a generational level. We are coming into our final years. We're coming into our power. And what are we going to leave behind? And for you, you've got this vision of a new city. And I ask you, please, to listen to your heart, to not go into this construction. This is mine. This is a gated community of the future, the smart city, the gated community. Instead, I'm asking you to expand, to open up your body, open up your heart, and become the gates to heaven, the gates to the human race expanding into a planetary organism that takes care of the resources of the world, that makes our computers into this global brain and heart so that we're able to manage the resources of the world. And I am all for building a city from scratch with the appropriate technologies to liberate humanity from mindless work and to create a leisure society where people can do work that they love. This is our task. This is our generational task. And you are one of the people of our generation. So please Go into your heart, go into your soul, listen to the wisdom within. Thank you.
Beautiful, doctress. See, that's the carrot. I've been focusing on the stick because I think homeboy needs a stick to wake up. And that's the public intervention. That's, you know, this is your Harvey Weinstein moment. That's the stick. So really, but what you've done is you've created a beautiful, delicious carrot for Bill Gates, which is the gates of heaven metaphor. So Bill Gates, it's up to you. Do you want to be Harvey Weinstein or do you want to be gates of heaven? Because you cannot be both. So take your pick. This is the beginning of the public intervention. Bill Gates, I love you. Let's make it happen. Choose the right pill, right? Whichever one you truly believe in your heart is the right one. I don't think it's Harvey Weinstein, but that's the path you're on, brother. And it's a very dark, poisonous path, not just for you, but for everyone around you. So make the right choice. And, but you know, this is the beginning of a process. I don't think Bill is just going to watch this video and then suddenly go, oh, I get it. But people around him will watch it and they'll say, Bill, you know what, you know, and that's when the people start to form this circle of love around you and say, Bill, we love you. We care about you. And this is not 1975 anymore, Bill. We've got to take a different approach. Hoarding is not the answer. And that'll be the beginning of the healing and the transformation. And I think Bill really can lead. He's got some amazing leadership qualities and potential, but he's just become this golem who is just so focused on hoarding and so addicted to that #1 spot. Anyway, I've said what I've had to say. Bill, welcome to your Harvey Weinstein moment. This is the beginning of true healing, and we're here for you. So just reach out. I'm available to meet anytime, and let's make it happen.
And Mr. Gates, also, I've written a dissertation on the archetypes of architecture. I'd be willing to, I'd love to talk to you about this so that we can have a revolutionary, evolutionary architectural design that saves the United States, that brings integrity back to politics, and that revolutionizes industry. So thank you.
Yeah, my final input is the damage that gets done by our way of life and Bill Gates and these other billionaires. They have accumulated so much and they don't seem to be able to put the brakes on. And as I said previously, you know, one of the things you have to do is if you want to stop a pattern of behavior, you do at some point in some way have to look at the consequences and understand what it is either a direct or indirect effect of your current hoarding behavior. And I do feel that, you know, someone like Bill Gates and so many others are essentially buffered and insulated from any of these consequences. And that what they, but intellectually, they ought to be able to understand what it is that is happening to people as a consequence of this unfettered greed hoarding behavior. And I don't know, you know, my sense is, as you just said, Jamin, I don't think this particular conversation is gonna lead to any kind of change in Bill Gates' mind. But I do think that focusing on people like Bill Gates, and in this instance, it's really interesting that certain circumstances have presented themselves. But I do think that people who are these money hoarders, who are completely insulated from their damage, just like the pilots who drop the bombs, you know, do the firebombing, the carpet bombing, drop the nuclear bombs on Japan, and those who ordered them to do it are very, very far removed from the damage and the consequences of their decisions. And therefore, I think that that's something which needs to be pounded on and brought to their attention. Now, some of these individuals may be sociopathic, psychopathic individuals. Just like in the military, there's a small number of people, maybe 2% or 3%, who aren't going to have much of a problem with the killing and the damages. They're kind of desensitized to it, and it doesn't bother them. But most people would. And I would imagine that a lot of these billionaires and other wealthy people below the billionaire level do have a conscience and would be able to see that they have, whether they've done it intentionally or not, they have gotten themselves into a very addictive pattern of behavior. It's just simply money hoarding, addicted to money and wealth. And hopefully we can keep, kind of pushing this set of ideas out there, and hopefully it'll get some traction. So I guess those are my final words.
I guess my final words, I have final words for you, Mr. Gates. And that is that I think that we have to think of the city as a spaceship and see the city as this miniaturization of our planet, more like a biosphere. Here in Tucson, Arizona, the Biosphere 2 was started, this experiment of enclosed city design. If you haven't gone to that experiment, I would suggest you go, because such a container is needed to live in outer space. And that's the expansion. And that's the way that we need to think of the city is everything is interrelated, and we can't pollute anything in that container because it will come back to us. So there's a lot of wisdom within the Biosphere 2 experiment. And let's create Biosphere 3 with your city and bring in the greatest scientists in the world to create this ecological design. You have the resource to do it. And where is the heart? Where is the heart? Where is the love for creativity, for innovation, for experimentation? And where's the love you have for 7 generations to come? Thank you.
Beautiful closing. Unless you have any final words, Dan or Doctors, I say we close it right there. What a great segment. All righty. Well, please tune in next time for the next episode of the Social Club at the End of the World. Thank you so much. Jamin Shively, Dan Bader, Doctors Newtopia. We are at your service. See you next time. Thank you.